Hey guys, welcome back. We are on episode 2 today of You Not Crazy Conversations of Hope. Today we are talking about healthy boundaries and how clarity and self-respect strengthens relationships. All right, so we are talking about how healthy boundaries are essential for maintaining and fulfilling relationships. Because we need it to protect our mental well-being. So we're going to dive into why we need to set and maintain boundaries in friendships, family dynamics, and even romantic relationships. Listen, I have my guest here who's also my friend. This is Carrie Jo White. Guys, let me tell you a little about her, okay? She's a devoted wife and mother, a Florida-based entrepreneur and beauty professional. Isn't she pretty, y'all? Listen, she is the owner of Contour Me by Carrie, a beauty business specializing in body sculpting services. Listen, her dedication to growth and resilience in her professional journey was featured. Listen, she's featured, y'all, in the Orlando Voyager magazine. In addition to her entrepreneurial endeavors, Carrie Jo serves as the vice president of Fit for Peace Incorporated, which is a company here in Orlando, Florida, guys. So let's welcome Carrie. Thank you for joining me today, Carrie. Listen, she's going to share her wisdom and her insight on how she has personally navigated the challenges of boundary setting. And she's here to share her experience with us, y'all. Okay. But before we get into that, we're going to talk about how healthy boundaries are important for us. Okay, so I want to discuss a little bit what boundaries are and how they are essential for maintaining good mental health. Because listen, boundaries protect our emotional well-being. It reduces stress. Listen, when I have my boundaries in place, I'm stress free. Well, not fully stress-free, but listen, I have less stress. So it also helps in our relationship. It prevents burnout and being overwhelmed. Listen, as women, that's a thing, right? So without boundaries, people often overextend themselves. And I know as women, that is one of the things that is really challenging for us guys, right? And it leads to emotional exhaustion and even sometimes in resentment in relationships, all right? So setting limits on work, social obligations, and responsibilities is necessary for rest and self-care, right? So if you think about a parent, you're a parent, right? Mm-hmm. So she has 3 beautiful children, you all. All right. So even just making sure she sets time for herself is essential. So we're going to dive a little bit more into how boundaries are important, and they create a sense of control for us, which can help ease anxiety and feeling overwhelmed. Clear boundaries prevents unhealthy attachment patterns. All right. It ensures mutual respect and allows individuals to communicate their needs without guilt. Oh, and listen, y'all, setting boundaries with difficult people prevents emotional manipulation and protects your self-esteem. All right, so let's talk about it, understanding healthy boundaries. Listen, many people hear the term boundaries, but they may not fully understand what it means. Can you share what healthy boundaries look like in relationships? Because oftentimes as a therapist, I see people who struggle with saying no. Why do you think setting boundaries is so difficult for so many people?
I think that it was difficult for certain people because they just didn't have the vocabulary.
Oh, I like that.
And understanding that boundaries, that you're responsible for what you're responsible for. So how you think a thing, how you communicate a thing, and how you act on a thing, that's what you're responsible for.
Ooh, I like
and
that.
So, and then also understanding where you end and where they begin.
Ooh.
So that is the boundary.
I like that.
Yeah.
Did y'all hear that? Where you end and they begin.
And where they begin.
That is where you set the boundary. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Sure. So when you establish a boundary, you're not trying to really keep people out. You're just trying to understand what makes you comfortable and your capacity. And so I would just say that it's just understanding, like, you have a line that you don't want crossed, and that's essentially that's what the boundary is for.
I love that. So, when I think about another reason why people may struggle to set boundaries is because the concept of people pleasing, right?
Sure.
It's like they want everyone to accept them, to not judge them or reject or abandon them, right? So, but with that being said, what do you think are some signs that someone might need to start setting boundaries in their life?
when they're always saying yes. When you're always saying yes to a thing, to a person, to a place, whatever, that's when you should be saying, well, you should be evaluating if you need a boundary. And if you say yes and you feel a way after you said yes, then that is when you need to be more in tune with how you're feeling and why you said yes in the first place. So are you people pleasing, or is there an unmet need there? So
yes.
yeah, there's a lot.
Yes, I like that, because yes, if we are always saying yes, then we're not really taking the time to evaluate where we are,
Right.
and what we need,
Right.
or if we just have the capacity to do something, right?
Capacity, for
Because we're just saying yes to appease someone else, right? And so not really checking in. And so with that being said, saying yes can be a challenge, especially with family and friends, those who really, really love us, right? So let's talk about boundaries within family and friendships, right? Because family relationships can sometimes be the hardest places to enforce boundaries, right? Because we love them. They're close to our hearts. So have you ever had to set boundaries with family, and what was that experience like?
So I actually just had to establish a new boundary with a family member.
Okay.
I just had to explain, because over time I've learned to communicate my boundary. So I explained to this individual, at this capacity or at this moment, I don't have that capacity because of this, and this. And she understood.
Okay.
And so I think once I understood how to communicate that boundary, it made it easier for me to set that boundary with this particular family member, because this person is a staple in my life. But I will also say that came over time, because it wasn't always that easy. I went through spells where I wouldn't talk to this person, or because I just didn't understand like what I was feeling and how to put things in place. So I would avoid what my feelings. I would avoid the issue. So I just established those boundaries with my family by communicating effectively.
I like that. You said something key. I think a lot of us do it, right? When we don't have the vocabulary to say where we are, or we don't fully understand where we are personally, then we do what we call avoidance, right? And so avoidance, when you think about the times that you did avoid the family member, what type of emotions arise because of that?
Resentment arised. Passive aggressiveness. I felt that I was being more passive aggressive, and they were resenting me, and I could feel it. And I think because they didn't have the vocabulary either, we were just going tit for tat, where it was just such a dark time in our relationship. So over time, through counseling with friends, and through counseling with the Holy Spirit, of course, I started to realize, okay, well, this is the way I need to address it. And finding the right time to do it, and setting the atmosphere to do it. So there's a lot of things to communicate your boundary, finding the right time to do it.
Timing is everything.
And setting the atmosphere. And writing them down, because people will tend to get defensive. So if you write it down and say, okay, well, I told you one thing, and then they start to get defensive. We will address that. Let me just finish. I can write it on here, and we can address it as soon as I'm done, just to keep us on track, so that we can get, because if you go round and round in circles, you'll realize, like, dang, we didn't really get anywhere.
I love that. Listen, she gave us some tips right there, guys. Listen, setting the time, because timing is everything, especially in relationships, right? Especially if you're in a dating relationship, being able to set time to actually speak to your partner instead of when it's boiling up, right? Timing and environment's everything, because if someone else is enduring something and they're just not in the mental space or have the capacity to receive you, then what's going to happen is the defense mechanism is going to arise, right? And so timing is everything for setting boundaries, right? And so we talked a little bit about families. Even when it comes to setting boundaries with close friends, that can also be a struggle. How have you navigated that in friendship?
So it's been rocky.
Okay.
It's been really rocky to do that. But now I feel like the friend group that I have now, we all understand our boundaries and our capacity. But beforehand, someone once told me that when you start establishing boundaries, the person that starts to get upset is the person that the boundary was established for in the first place.
Ooh, that's
but I
good,
didn't
yeah.
understand that. And so I just knew something needed to take place in this particular situation. And so when it happened, I did not do my due diligence in really figuring out what was wrong with me. I just started to pull away, which caused a lot of frustration.
Okay.
And so because she saw me in a different light, or she, you know, we were friends for a very long time. So she saw me as the old Carrie and not the person that's evolving. I think that's the issue with friendships. We don't see them as they evolve. We see them as they were when we first met, not realizing that they changed. Same thing in marriage. Like, I'm married, so I have to see my husband in a different light each time. So I know we'll get there, but
No, that's good. That's good. Let's stay there.
Okay,
Listen,
okay.
listen. And I love how you said that we evolve, right? And so the
evolve.
boundaries that I had last year, even 6
not
months,
be.
it may not be the same boundaries that I have this year or in this
Correct.
moment,
In
right?
this season.
In this season
In
of
this
my
season
life,
in
right?
your
And so I think that is key, that we have to set boundaries by being in tune, so that self-awareness, figuring out what it is that we have the capacity for. We know if, I know you mentioned that you have kids, so, you know, if you have children that are in sports or extracurricular activities in this particular season of life and versus another season, then your capacity is going to change based upon what you got going on.
Absolutely. With 3 kids, I have a senior in high school about to graduate,
Don't she look good, y'all?
senior in high school, then I have a 6th grader, and then I have a kindergartner. And really juggling their activities plus my life. I'm married. I have my own business. We have a nonprofit, requires boundaries.
Definitely.
And I hold true to my boundary. I don't say yes to everything. I look at my calendar first. I will hold on to a text message before I say yes, just because I want to make sure
good.
that I checked all the what does Elijah have to do? What does Calvin have to do? What does Layla have to do? What does CJ have to do? Okay. All right. What do I have to do? Cool. I have the capacity to fit that in. But that's just understanding, because I've failed at this for a long time. So
Help the people out.
I failed at this for a long time. So we have a calendar.
I like that.
And I am true to it. I just was fussing at Elijah yesterday. He's like, oh, I have to work. I was like, it's not on the calendar. He's like, oh, they just called me. And I'm like, okay. So, you know, just understanding that everyone needs to play their part as well.
I love that. I love that. And so she gave us another tool, guys. Listen, if you have a family, get that calendar
Get
so
a
everybody
family
can be
calendar.
on the same page, right? Those
Yeah.
are boundaries. So I love how you said that, you know, you have to figure out, you know, you said you hold on to the text before you respond. All right. So she gives herself that thinking time before she makes a decision.
Absolutely.
But that sometimes doesn't erode the emotions that can come with, you know, wanting to say no to family or to friends. So what advice would you give to someone who feels guilty for setting boundaries with loved ones?
So if you feel guilty, I would find out why you even feel guilty in the first place.
okay.
Because that's a much deeper rooted issue than just saying no. Because feeling of guilt and shame is not something that we should be feeling to say no. So that may be something you do need to establish with that person. Okay, why do I feel guilty with this person? So I should probably see, how do they react? How do they make me feel? What do I need to evaluate in that relationship? Take, for instance, my husband. When we were figuring out our lives and the fluid ways of our lives, I told him I needed 2 days to myself throughout the week.
I like that.
And he gave a lot of pushback because he was used to a certain schedule. And I was like, but I can't. Like, I'm overwhelmed. And so Tuesday and Thursday became my night. And I would go out, have dinner for myself, music, whatever. I would sit somewhere else and just relax. Or even if I didn't go anywhere, I would be at home. And if I was home, it was daddy's home. Please go to daddy.
Like that.
But I had to understand that I had a certain capacity. And I had to understand, even if I felt guilty in saying no to him, it felt better for me. And I know we shouldn't always go with our feelings, but in that case, and it ended up working out, because now he was home more with the kids and they were seeing him more. I was having my my time. So it just worked out. And someone told me keeping the peace is not really keeping the peace, it's keeping their peace. And so me feeling guilty of saying no was keeping the peace for him, but then it was creating a storm within me. So now that I have said no to him in the most respectful way, we have a fluent household. That took time though.
I love that, right? So she said a lot, guys, that talks about even why boundaries are important in romantic relationships, right? Because it's important that we improve our relationship by making sure that we also tune into our emotional needs, right? I think sometimes we get in relationships and we're so focused on how to please our partner, you know, that's a good thing, but we also can't forget ourselves. It's almost as though we have to fill our cup as well, right? And so I love how you point out how in boundaries in romantic relationships can look like being aware of your emotional needs, what you need, personal space, right? Those are very important. And you mentioned even how you communicated that, right? In a respectful way. Like, you know, I'm thinking about you, but this is important to me as well. So even communication styles is very important in relationships, right? And so from there, you know, when it comes to not setting boundaries and the challenges and the guilt that comes with that, again, as she mentioned, a lot of people fear that setting boundaries will push others away, right? But if we are dealing with that guilt, we need to figure out, okay, what has it been about their reactions or their response to us in the past that's causing me to, you know, fear setting those boundaries, right? And so even in that, and sometimes it could be stuff that's within us that we can investigate in therapy, where we can figure out, is it a fear of rejection or a fear of being abandoned that has taught us, you know, how to keep our needs and our wants and our opinions to ourselves. So from there, you know, I just want to discuss some strategies for enforcing boundaries in a kind but firm way. All right. And so sometimes, as Carrie mentioned, when she was explaining to her husband what she needs, sometimes it's using those I statements like, I feel overwhelmed when I have to take on all these tasks alone. And then I need, you know, X, Y, and Z. And so we call those I statements, right? And then even what she mentioned as far as making sure we have the setting, the environment to make sure that the person that we're discussing these boundaries with receive us, right? And so we call that assertive communication style. It is being aware of our needs and making sure that we communicate it to those that we're setting those boundaries. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're always going to abide by it,
right?
But we want to make sure that we are aware and we're standing on business about what we need, right? Standing on business. All right. So from there, I just want to talk about some steps that you think you can give listeners as far as actionable steps to start setting boundaries. What are some actionable steps that you would say that from your experience?
Okay, so I would say the first thing to do is to evaluate. Evaluate how you feel. Is there someone that needs to go outside that boundary? Evaluate the situation and really take that in. Then the next step I would say would communicate effectively, and how you communicate, set the atmosphere, write them down. And when you write them down, don't just write down all the stuff that bothers you, write down solutions, because then you're now providing solutions to a problem. And then I would say, you touched on this, be consistent. Be consistent with your boundaries. If you set it, you said it,
right,
and you follow it. That is it. Don't waver. If 8 o'clock is your bedtime, then 8 o'clock is your bedtime. I mean, I don't know.
I'm going to sleep.
That's it. But you know, and I'm very, very consistent in my home. I'm consistent, and I give a lot of. Oh, you know what? I would also add: give your friends some grace. Give everyone grace.
Important. Give them grace and time.
Yeah, give them grace to adjust to your boundary, because you may have communicated it, and you may have communicated it effectively, but they still need to maneuver through that that process. So give them grace to understand the boundary. So yeah.
Good. I love that.
Yeah.
And for anyone who may need a resource, there is a book called Boundaries.
Boundaries.
That you can check out. So as we mentioned today, boundaries are not about shutting people out. Listen,
Right.
they're about protecting your mental health while maintaining healthy balance within your relationships.
Right.
And when set with clarity and kindness, they lead to greater emotional stability, improved self-esteem, and just the overall well-being. All right. So thank you guys so much for taking the time to tune in to You Not Crazy Conversations of Hope. We hope that you took away something that was insightful and some wisdom, and that you felt seen and heard and understood in some way. So don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. You never know who needs this information. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Thank you so much, Carrie, for joining us today.
It was a pleasure.
I appreciate
Thank you.
I
Thank you
love
for having me.
Thank
Love
you. Bye.